Uh-oh.
In her last two fights. Good way hitting him from that way down.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. A look at an unbeaten up-and-comer from right here in the US of A. Comes from a fighting family, Stephanie Han, the younger sister of former IBF featherweight champion Jennifer Han of El Paso, Texas. Set to return to action very soon opposite the ring veteran journeywoman Cruz of Nicaragua. Fighter with an upside-down record. Stephanie sports a professional record of 6 wins with no losses, no draws, 2 knockouts. Campaigning in the lightweight division. Lightweight, that's 135 pounds. That's where Katie Taylor has reigned as that division's undisputed champion. Currently, that's where Rhiannon Dixon may see herself become a champion. Carolyn Dubois may see herself become a champion. Beatrice Ferreira may see herself become a champion, and that's where Stephanie Han campaigns. Stephanie Han, a fighter who started out in a sport of boxing. She started out boxing from age 10, boxed up until age 21, took a long hiatus from the sport, and came back in her early 30s. Comes from a fighting family, the Fighting Hans of Texas. Varied martial arts background, the whole family. They're all fighters and they're all winners. It seems that Stephanie Han is trying her hand out at boxing in the pro ranks as a professional. She'll be facing Cruz. Wendellin's a tough old bird, tough old broad. She's got an upside-down record, 6 wins with 11 losses and 1 draw. But in 18 professional bouts, what you'll notice is that in 18 starts, she's never been stopped. She's never been knocked out. Stephanie Han, she means to change that. Cruz is 1-5 in her last 6 fights. 1-5. That's saying that out of the last 5 fights that she's had, she's only won 1. She's coming off of 3 consecutive losses. Yeesh. So this is a developmental fight for Stephanie. That's what this is. This is a chance for her to garner further professional experience in the pro ranks, more rounds in the bank, more time under the hot lights. She's gonna fight. She just fought. A little over a week ago. She just fought. Racked up a highlight reel knockout over Nikola Izvova. Is that how you say that? That's how I said it. A little over a week ago, at the beginning of this month, at the beginning of next month, she's set to return to action against Cruz in an attempt to advance to a professional record of 7-0. Stephanie Han, she debuted as a professional in October of 2021. She's fought 6 times since then, and she's a spiteful fighter, a spiteful puncher. She's got some power. At least at this level, she does. I remember her older sister. I remember Jennifer Han. Jennifer, very skilled fighter, mover, a lot more cerebral than what you get from Stephanie Han. It's the difference between Naoya Inoue and Takuma Inoue. One fight is a boxer, one fight is a puncher, but they're both siblings. We'll say that Stephanie having debuted in late 2021, there is more work needs doing in terms of her form, her function, fight mechanics. But that's what fights like the Cruz fight are for. That's what that's for. That's a developmental fight to give her more time in the ring, more rounds in the bank, more experience. But there is definitely something there. It's kind of hot, too. She fought 3 times last year, and she's already fought once this year. If she takes care of business next month, that leaves the rest of the year clean and clear. That leaves the rest of the year open to schedule more fights, more developmental fights, because she needs them. 135, the lightweight division. It's a very deep division, as stated. Rhiannon Dixon is there. Carolyn Dubois is there. Beatrice Ferreira is there. That could very well be the next wave of champions at this weight. And if Stephanie Han means to become one among them, she's got to keep the train going, keep the momentum going, keep fighting. I think here and now, she may be a ways out from fighting for a full alphabet title. She may be a ways out from doing that.
She is.
Shouldn't worry about alphabet titles until the following year, next year, 2025. What this year, what she should spend it doing is continuing to develop. You can't skip steps in a sport of boxing. If you do, eventually it's going to catch up.
It always does.
Keep an eye on the ring return of Stephanie Han early next month. In men's super flyweight news, the wheels appear to be in motion for a Gallo Estrada versus Bam Rodriguez fight targeted for late June in Phoenix, Arizona.
We've talked about this fight.
Its potentiality and how Gallo hasn't fought since the Chocolatito trilogy, the third installment of their saga. He hasn't fought in well over a year. He needs a tune-up fight if he's trying to win this thing. A deal for WBC super flyweight champion Juan Francisco Estrada to defend his strap against the unified flyweight titleist Jesse Bam Rodriguez is nearing. The battle of the top 115 pound-for-pound fighters is targeted for Phoenix, Arizona on Saturday, June 29th. One day before Mexico's soccer match with Ecuador, also in Arizona.
Strategic placement of the match. When a lot of Mexican sports fans are going to be in town, they're already going to be in town, is a good idea.
That they might so decide to take in a boxing match the day before the big soccer game. The fight, should it be finalized, would headline a Matchroom USA show and be streamed live on DAZN worldwide. Bam Rodriguez became a champion under the Matchroom stable. You could definitely argue that Matchroom has groomed him.
What do you mean?
Well, after Raymond Ford's big win for what was the vacant WBA title at featherweight against Kolmatov, over there on the top rank side of things, I saw a lot of people saying that Raymond was Matchroom's first, Matchroom USA's first champion.
The first one they developed? I don't necessarily agree with that, because what about Bam?
Bam became a champion at super flyweight long before Raymond won the WBA title. He subsequently moved down in weight, became a unified champion at flyweight. Now he's moving back up.
He's a special fighter, this kid.
What represents the next generation of fighters from right here in the US of A, the next wave of ambitious youngsters that aren't modeling their own careers after someone else like a Mayweather or a...
Yeah, we got enough of that.
In the subsequent years that have followed Floyd Mayweather's retirement from the sport of boxing, the sport of pro boxing, and not those hapless exhibition matches he's been staging, we've been seeing a lot of guys try to model their own careers after him, with little to no success.
The would-be Mayweathers.
Risk-averse individuals that want the most rewards for the least risks, which doesn't necessarily reflect Floyd Mayweather's career
In its entirety.
but that's how they interpret it. Averse to risks, whereas Bam took a risk. He took a risk moving up 2 weight classes on short notice to fight a fighter who's a lot more experienced than he is in Carlos Cuadras for what was the WBC super flyweight title.
People tend to forget that not only did he move up in weight for that fight 2 divisions, it was on short notice.
When you think about that, you realize this kid's not protecting his unbeaten, unblemished record. It took balls to do that because that was a risk, a big risk, but it paid off.
Fortune favors the bold.
Had that big fight with Sonny Edwards at flyweight. Now he's moving back up in weight for Gallo Estrada. Gallo Estrada was in talks to unify with Kazuto Ioka, WBA super flyweight champion. A deal, however, could not be reached, and the WBA has now ordered Kazuto to face his mandatory challenger, Scrappy Ramirez, next.
A separate matter.
I favor Bam to win the Gallo Estrada fight, even if Gallo manages to squeeze in a tune-up fight between now and late June. I still favor Bam to win that fight. Gallo, he's more experienced. He's been there and done that with some of the best and brightest fighters at these weights, but he's getting long in the tooth, and the edge that I give to Bam is because he's the younger, fresher fighter with the fresher set of legs. They can punch. They can both punch. Bam, Gallo.
But Bam's reflexes are sharper. His legs are fresher. Not as much wear and tear.
And it's got to be a relief that he's not boiling down to flyweight anymore, that he's going to go back up to super flyweight, which is easier to make.
I think Bam wins the fight.
Turning our attention to Kazuto Ioka. Kazuto Ioka, the super flyweight division's WBA champion, who's under orders to face Scrappy Ramirez.
We've talked about that.
And we talked about how he tried to corner a fight with Gallo Estrada, the one we just talked about. He tried to corner a fight with him last year, but Gallo didn't like the money.
As a result, he sat out all of last year.
He didn't fight. He hasn't fought since the third Chocolatito fight over a year ago.
If he doesn't get in a tune-up fight between now and late June, I'm going to assume that he's cashing out. He's coming to cash out against Bam Rodriguez because he could have fought and he should have fought against Kazuto Ioka last year.
But he didn't like the money.
That's no excuse. You can't turn your nose up at what Kazuto is offering you for a unification match when nobody else offered you anything last year. It took over a year.
Took over a year for this Bam Rodriguez fight, this Bam Rodriguez offer to roll around.
It's cashing out.
That's how I look at it. At this stage and at this age, Gallo didn't want to risk what he had for the money that was being offered, but if he was confident, he would have went over there, kept busy with Kazuto Ioka, win the fight, come back to America, fight with Bam. Sitting out for that amount of time just tells me,
Sitting out without a fight.
bottom line, I don't think that was a good idea. Kazuto Ioka pursued a unification match with him, didn't have any luck. Now, he's under orders to fight Scrappy Ramirez, but he does have one other option.
What?
He can see about unifying with IBF Super Flyweight champion Fernando Martinez.
Not just Fernando, he could also run it back with Kosei Tanaka now that Kosei's WBO champion. Did you forget about him?
Few thoughts on Kazuto Ioka. Kazuto Ioka has been around just as long as Chocolatito, just as long as Gallo Estrada, Sorbrun Visai.
Carlos Quadras.
He's been around just as long as those guys, and he's just as accomplished, if not more accomplished, than some of them. He's a 4-division champion.
I think of him as the fifth Beatle.
You often hear about the four kings at Super Flyweight. Choco, Gallo, Carlos, Sor.
I think of Kazuto as the fifth Beatle. He even shares some common opponents with those guys, but because his fights are largely based in Japan, he doesn't get talked about much here in the West.
He's been doing well for himself, almost in a parallel universe to Chocolatito, Gallo Estrada, what other notoriable fighters are at or around these weights, though not for lack of trying. He pursued a unification match with Jerwin Ancajas back when he had the IBF title. He just pursued a unification match with Gallo Estrada.
If those fights didn't happen, it's not his fault. It's always the other guy that goes in another direction.
The current IBF champion, Fernando Martinez, he's been saying he wants to fight Kazuto Ioka as far back as October of 2022, but what has he actually done to do that fight?
A year's gone by. What's he done?
I would rather see Kazuto take on either Fernando Martinez or Kosei Tanaka in a rematch, in a unification, because this division needs one. I'd rather see that than see Kazuto fight Scrappy Ramirez. Nothing against him. He's a good fighter, and that would be a good fight, but there are better fights to make.
For a 4-division champion.
For a fighter as decorated as Kazuto, there are better fights to make and bigger fish to fry. I don't know if the window is closed for him because the order from the WBA has already come down. Heard something about him petitioning for amnesty, petitioning for an exemption to the mandatory so he can pursue a unification. He can't get Gallo, but what about the other two champions at this weight? Can he get them?
We'll see.
I'm not so impressed. He did what he should have do, and that's it. Now I'm glad because of boxing, and he defended our sport, and thanks to Anthony Joshua. Tyson Fury did embarrassed our sport with his performance, and I think he was not so ready, and he underestimated Ngannou so much, and he was not in great shape. But Joshua defended colors of our sport, and thanks to him,
I said it in my previous video. I'll say it here again. The entire sport of boxing and everyone in it is indebted to Anthony Joshua for restoring the balance and restoring the sport's good name. It was boxing scribe Jean Zettel who said Anthony Joshua was no longer the heavyweight we wanted, but he has made himself into the heavyweight we needed.
Left in the hands of Tyson Fury, the sport of boxing would have been reduced to the laughingstock of the combat world.
Tyson Fury, the self-proclaimed #1 heavyweight of this era, and those in the boxing media that went along with him.
Even though Usyk is still out there.
Not the point. There were those in the boxing media and the boxing community at large that went along with Tyson Fury's shenanigans, even though they were subject to some debate. There were those who egged him on, supported him, some who still do.
Even when he collectively embarrasses us all.
Sean's comment in particular, Sean's comment got my attention because many of those individuals are right here in the United States, right here in America, that thought it at all special that because Tyson Fury came here and beat a one-handed fighter, a one-handed puncher with a paper-thin resume.
Well, there's a credible win on Fury's resume. I'm not saying that it isn't, and that he did it on the road. That's good too.
But I've said it a million times and I'll say it a million more, that things got blown out of proportion to the detriment of the sport and the detriment of the heavyweight division. Don't you notice now that things are heating back up?
And it's not because of Fury. It surely ain't because of Wilder. It's because of Anthony. It's because the landlord is back.
Heavyweight boxing is back.
That's because of Anthony, not them.
And that was always the situation. That was always the case from the very beginning towards the tail end of the Klitschko era, right here in America. Americans weren't watching or talking about heavyweight boxing.
They didn't even really care when Fury beat Klitschko.
And don't bring up Wilder, because Wilder's been around as far back as 2008.
He was there for most of the Klitschko era, and people were not talking about him either. No, his career didn't gain traction until a little-known Brit that goes by the name Anthony Joshua, shocked the world in the Klitschko fight.
That's the fight that set the division ablaze. That's the fight that set everything in motion, and all the money and attention this division is getting now, it was due to that fight. It was really due to Anthony.
The common denominator in the biggest fights that you can hope to make in this division is Anthony, whether it's Anthony Joshua versus Fury or Anthony Joshua versus Wilder.
But American xenophobia had its role to play when they saw that the guy getting the most attention at the weight was a Brit and not an American. They didn't like that, so they decided to rally behind Deontay Wilder.
And we all know what that turned into.
They didn't care much about him before. They didn't care about him until Anthony Joshua started shaking things up. That's when they started caring. That's when they really got behind him.
And we all know what that turned into.
Hard feelings towards Eddie Hearn, hard feelings towards Anthony Joshua, Matchroom, and all things British, all things foreign. When Sean Zeidel says that Anthony was no longer the heavyweight we wanted, but he's made himself into the heavyweight we needed, that's what he's talking about.
They were told that Anthony is the bad guy. They were told Anthony is the scared one, the stiff one, the robotic one.
They were told that by Deontay Wilder. They were told that by Tyson Fury.
That fucking idiot.
You would allow that fucking idiot to bring the entire sport's reputation down, its public image, for no other reason than he beat Deontay?
That's what it is. You know that's what it is.
Been downplaying Anthony Joshua's career accomplishments this whole time, the people that he fought, the people that he beat.
Like Joseph Parker?
Because you allowed Fury and Wilder to collectively gaslight you into thinking that they were better, that they were somehow better for having fought each other.
If you enjoyed their trilogy, more power to you.
If you were entertained. But them fighting each other as many times as they didn't make them number one or number two at this weight. There was always more work needed doing.
And Anthony's here to do it.
While he cleans up Tyson Fury's mess and restores the sport's good reputation. To some, as Sean Zeidel stated, Anthony Joshua wasn't the heavyweight that some people wanted, but it turns out he's the heavyweight the sport needed.